Welcome, you are listening to the Twice Over Movies podcast. In these first few episodes, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes explaining who we are and what we're doing with this podcast and website. So as you can tell, this podcast is specifically about movies. My name is Faraz and I'll be hosting each episode alongside a rotating co-host between Fahad, Yusuf, and Farhan. Each episode is for one movie. We will spend 10 to 20 minutes discussing our scores without giving away any major spoilers. Afterwards, we will have a spoiler alert, and then we will dive into a deeper discussion into the movie. And that will go as long as it goes, maybe 15 to 45 additional minutes. Our scores are broken into 5 segments of a movie. First, acting, defined as the execution of the writing and story by the actors. Second, direction and plot, defined as the entertainment value, pace, and audience connection. Third is the writing, which is defined as primarily the dialogue. Fourth is the cinematography and photography, defined as the visual appeal of the movie. Fifth, themes and motifs, defined as the presentation of the underlying message and/or idea. For each of these categories, we assess if it was substantive, purposeful, logical, engaging, satisfying, clear, consistent, etc. This is where the website comes into play. Depending on how you order the importance of the categories mentioned, you will get a composite score indicating the strength of the movie on your standards. Currently, you will see a score based only on how the host rated the movie, but we have every intention to include you into the process to add a community score alongside the host score. We hope you enjoyed the podcast, continue listening, and support us. Now on to the episode.
It sounds to me like you're looking at the world, looking at your wife through tired eyes. It sounds like she's become a sort of thing, a problem, a thing.
Hey everyone, this is Faraz.
This is Fahad.
Today we're discussing A Serious Man, movie from 2009, directed by the Coen brothers.
And this was a film that I highly recommended to Faraz.
This is true. This is one of Fahad's picks to get started so you, the audience, can get an idea of what kind of movies
That I
we
like.
like to watch, specifically for Fahad in this one. All right, Fahad, so let's just get right to it. We'll talk about the scores first.
Sure. So, do you want to get started with the writing score?
Yeah, sure. So I gave this a 90 out of 100, meaning that it is a must watch based on just the writing.
Okay. So, I gave it a score of 95.
Okay, so you liked it a little more than me.
Just a little bit more, yes. I thought it was great. It pushed the comedy and absurdity to a great extent. Every line was dripping with absurdity.
I do agree with you that the writing was great, and a lot of the comedy is standing on the shoulders of the writing, and it's done very well. We can move on to the next one. We'll talk about acting. Here, I gave it a 75. I thought it was just a little above average, nothing too specific about it that made me think that this movie, that is something you would go watch for the acting.
I agree completely. I give it a score of 80. I thought the merits of the acting don't demand a must watch for this film, but I thought it was very purposeful. I thought all the performances were flawless, and it was very believable.
Okay, and let's do photography, cinematography. Here I gave it a 70, which is just straight average. I mean, in terms of what it was meant to do, which was give you a muted, subdued feeling, suburban life, plain, it did it. However, there was no shot that stuck with me, no scene that was just shot particularly uniquely. It was just well done, average, but nothing incredible.
For the score of photography and cinematography, I gave it a score of 85. I thought every shot was very purposeful. It was very efficient. Like you, I thought that color grading of the film set the time and the place correctly. It captured the gray tones to depict suburbia. The most interesting shot was the opening scene in which the camera is traveling through the ear canal and the music soaring. I just thought that was the best scene of the movie. That was an interesting shot for me.
Next category, we had it as story and plot, but I want to be more clear so the audience understands we're also talking about direction. So I changed the name to say direction and plot. Here I gave it a 75. What about you, Fahad?
I gave it a score of 95.
Okay, so here we have a significant difference though. For me, it was just above average. I didn't think, the Coen brothers did a good job of pushing the story and presenting the story in a cohesive, understandable, not confusing manner. But the story itself didn't have much to it other than what we saw. And the direction was well done, but nothing special in my opinion. But you gave it a 95. Why is that?
Okay, let me get into it a little bit. First, I thought it was a very strange plot to define. It's very difficult to describe what exactly this film was about. The best summary I could give is this is a movie about a man whose life is slowly unfolding before us, and he's questioning as to why it's happening to him. One way to read this story is through the lens of the book of Job. As you know, the Jewish tradition shares the story of a man who loses everything and asks God why it's happening to him. In the book of Job, as he's losing everything that he endears, he asks God why it's happening to him, right? And so in this movie, in Serious Man, there is a level of irony because here there's a man who understands physics and mathematics to a great extent. He has all the answers in that domain, yet he lacks the capacity to understand questions which should have simple answers. That bad things happen to good people without good reason.
That's a good point, and I think that gets us to our last category, themes and motif. What did you give that, Fahad?
I gave it a score of 100.
Oh man, I gave this an 80. I did think it was worth a watch just for the themes and motifs. It is very well done, and the way, like you just mentioned, it has this like strong irony throughout the whole movie, where you have this very smart, seemingly well-to-do family that has it going for them generally speaking, but things start unraveling, and they're not well, not they, more like just the main character, Larry. He doesn't understand what's happening to him and why it's happening to him. That's all I got. So yeah, but you gave it 100, Fahad. So
So the reason why I gave it 100, I thought each plot element, every minute detail, drove together this one concept, and it was pretty impressive. There were nearly 12 to 15 little short plot arcs going on in this movie, from listening to the story about the goy with the inscription in his teeth to the opening fable which opened the movie. They all drove at a similar concept and theme, which I thought was impressive for the writing to really drive at the same themes. And that theme would be the lack of clarity in people's lives.
got that from the movie as well. So you have this theme where you have a community, the Jewish community, and they're very connected. However, like his family specifically seem very disconnected. He seems to not have much of a relationship with his children. Obviously, we find out very early on that he doesn't have much of a relationship with his wife. They fall back onto their like tradition, their Jewish tradition. They go to their rabbis for advice. For someone like Larry, who is a physicist, who is very intelligent at math, he just wants to know all the time what everything means.
And why it's happening, right? Understanding the underlying reason behind everything.
Yeah, so if he comes across something that doesn't make sense to him, he is, gung ho about finding out
Right.
what is happening, why is it happening, and why is it happening to me
And you know
specifically.
what? His brother actually shares the same predilection. He has, if you remember, the Mentaculus that he's writing, and
Yeah.
what that drives at is his attempt at unfolding life's mysteries through a series of complex equations or whatever else he was writing in that book. When Larry opens it up, it looks like from his face you can read that it's complete gibberish. Although we don't get a closer look at the exact writings, that's what his face suggests.
Okay, so Fahad, I think we've gone through the scores. This here for the listener is a spoiler alert. Anything we talk about now, we'll discuss the story fully without anything held back. So if you have not watched the movie, we do suggest, both of us suggest, to actually go watch it. And if you want to join us later to listen to what we have to discuss, please do so. And if you don't care about spoilers, you can continue listening.
So, Faraz,
Yeah,
I'm going to make a bold statement.
go for it.
This movie has no spoilers. Agree or disagree?
I do agree with you. I do. I don't think there's anything here that happens that would shock anyone. And this kind of goes back to my score for the direction and plot, and why I gave it a 75 is because it's predictable. It's unsurprising. It's simple. It's easy to understand. But yeah, for those reasons, I agree with you that this movie doesn't have much of a spoiler. There's a couple things that do happen. We see, well, there's a couple things, right? There's Cy Abelman, who dies in the car accident. That you could say is
Right,
a
right. So
spoiler.
that could be a mini spoiler because it cascades into his funeral and the irony in which Larry has to pay for this man's
Yeah.
funeral. right?
And then, so the other spoiler I would say is Larry's brother, Uncle Arthur. He has a couple moments where he gets arrested at one time for being in a building that has prostitutes or something. I don't. They didn't really get into it very much.
For sodomy.
Oh yeah, for sodomy. Yeah, exactly. He got arrested for sodomy.
And then there's that whole exchange about Larry's confusion as to why Arthur was even going to those halal mixers in which Jewish people, meet each other.
I would say those things, I guess, are spoilers. I don't think it hurts to know that that's going to happen beforehand. It's not like it's trying to surprise you out of like thin air that, oh, Sai is going to die. Actually, I would get into this. Sai's death or the scene that leads to his death, it was just very well done. They had a couple moments like this actually. One was the Larry's in the car, Sai's in the car. They're both in the car at the same time. They're driving at the same time, and it's going.
And Larry's distracted looking at his
Yeah,
student
yeah,
riding on the
Clive
bicycle.
on the bicycle.
Right, right.
And he gets like angry with him, so he gets in an accident.
Larry's gonna cause the accident, right?
Well, actually, I initially when I was watching it, that was the first thought that came across, but then since it keeps cutting back and forth, you see that they're in totally different parts of the town. Like Sai's in this like very more rural area, many less cars. The two scenes, first one was Sai driving and Larry driving. Larry sees Clive, gets angry, is distracted, crashes into the car. They never show Sai getting in a car accident, but since the back and forth and the way they were presenting it, the way it was shot,
Mhm.
like you just assumed what was
Mm.
happening in one end is going to happen at the
Yeah,
other end.
and it
So
did create this moment of tension, created exclusively through the editing process and the cinematography.
yeah, pretty well done too. And like just like actual where the setting where Sai was turning, it was like a corner. He couldn't see beyond the corner, and he was just sitting there waiting to take that left turn. The other time that they have this happen is actually at the very end. So the scene with Danny at the very end, where he's in the school and the tornado warning is coming,
Yeah.
they cut back to what part of the movie? Do you remember?
So with in that scene, right, where they're cutting between the son and the father, there is something similar going on. There's this impending sense of doom with the doctor. He's about to give Larry some terrible news, right? Likely cancer. I'm speculating cancer. And with the son, you're seeing the tornado bearing down on them.
Yep. And then you hear the siren go off
Right.
in the back.
A very creepy sound effect.
So like that plus what we already witnessed with Cy Abelman and Larry's accident, we can assume that it's a similar things about to happen, bad things about to happen to both of them, or for sure to Larry, because that's been what the whole movie has been about, just one bad thing after another. You know what we haven't talked about?
What's that?
The very very beginning of the movie,
Uh-huh.
the mini story from old
Ooh,
time,
I'd love to discuss that.
the Yiddish story about the coming across that ghost, the Dybbuk.
Yes. So the opening fable, it's this great short story which shares a lot of the themes with the whole movie. It gives us an almost taste of what the rest of the film is going to be about. It's almost a primer, kind of in the way that Disney gives us a primer with their shorts.
Yeah, similar to like the Pixar movies.
Right, exactly. The Pixar movies.
How would you say connected? So the story itself goes like this. You have a husband that comes home to his wife and he's like, "You wouldn't believe who I saw." And it's some person from the town, someone's uncle, and the wife goes, "Wait, that person died 2 years ago," or something like that. And he's like, "Oh no, I just saw him. I even invited him over." And she's like, "You invited a ghost. They called him a Dybbuk. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right."
Dybbuk, which is just a djinn in their story.
Yeah, so that's what so she's like, "Why would you invite a Dybbuk to the house? That wasn't smart." And he's like, "I saw him. It wasn't a Dybbuk. He's not dead. It's a real
He even
person."
helped me repair my carriage or something along those lines, right?
Yeah, like physically like helped him. So Dybbuk does come over and the wife ends up stabbing him
Yeah.
and he doesn't die, at least not on screen. He stands up and walks
He
away.
walks out of the cottage, and the woman, the wife, is still convinced that was the book, and the man is terrified at the consequences of what she has done. So each
Yeah, he's straight up thinking like, "Oh, you just murdered someone. We're gonna be in big
Yeah.
trouble."
And we're the audience is left wondering, well, which is it? And it's that sense of confusion, that lack of clarity that is going to be that ties into the rest of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you, what was your favorite mini story? You mentioned earlier on that there was
Oh,
like 12 to 15 narratives happening on the side. I don't know if there was that many, but definitely like more than
for
5.
example, there was that mini thing about his son not being able to watch TV, so Larry has to get up on the roof, fix the antenna to capture the signal, right? I think he did that
Yeah.
once or twice, right? And that's allegorical to me. That's him seeking to fix this lack of communication. The cinematography really nails at it. He's looking down. Well, the camera's looking down at him. He's looking up skyward, right? So that moment, it's an allegory to me. Well, I interpreted it as an allegory. It's representing the lack of clarity in his life, the signal noise, the distortion that's impairing his ability to watch TV. That's present in his life too.
That's a good point. And so that was your favorite one, or that was just one of the good ones?
My favorite story in this movie was when Larry goes to his rabbi. It was his second rabbi, and this rabbi is telling him the story of when a goy, which is a non-Jewish person, comes to a Jewish dentist's office, and this Jewish dentist notices inscriptions in his teeth, and in his teeth there's writing in Yiddish, and this Jewish person, this Jewish dentist, he's confused as to why their God has placed writing in this goy's teeth. He's wondering the cosmic purpose of it. So this dentist goes back to the rabbi that Larry's currently talking to, and the rabbi is giving his consultation as to clarify what could be the divine purpose of God putting those inscriptions in the teeth. And you find out that the rabbi gives this man no useful information to process this confounding mystery as to why inscriptions in Yiddish were in a goy's mouth. I thought it was brilliantly comedic, absurd, everything.
That one was a very good one for sure. Cause then who asks Larry about it later in the movie and says, "Oh, did he tell you the story about the goy?"
Oh yeah, yeah. Who was it? Was it another rabbi or was it? Oh, it was a lawyer. He goes to
Oh yeah, it's a lawyer. Yeah, yeah. His lawyer asks him about it, and then like the lawyer is like, "Yeah, he just there's nothing to it."
well, the lawyer mentions it. But what you can read behind it is that the lawyer also went to this rabbi to seek consultation, and the rabbi provides a story which provides no meaning. And if he's providing the story with no meaning, is he really helping those who seek the rabbi's help? Is that a divine?
I think we can infer that it is trying to show us that this rabbi in particular is not really of much use to
Well,
his
I
community.
argue that all the rabbis in this movie are of no use. The first one was completely inexperienced in life. He's saying, But look at that parking lot, Larry. Just look at that parking lot." He's, he's so earnest in the way he says it, but yet it lacks meaning to Larry. And then the second rabbi, that's the one with the goy and the dentist, and that offers no meaning. And the third rabbi even refuses to see him. So the rabbis in this movie were useless.
They were the opening quote that I'm going to use for this movie. You presumably have already heard it post edit. It is the first rabbi when he says to Larry, "It sounds to me like you're looking at the world, looking at your wife through tired eyes. It sounds like she's become sort of a thing, a problem, a thing." That's the first rabbi. Yeah, like he has no idea what the hell he's saying.
And he urges Larry to change his perspective.
Yeah.
So the opening scene is a shot where you're traveling through the ear canal into Larry's son's ear, into his earbud, and the song that's playing that Larry's son is currently listening to is a song called one second, "Somebody to Love" by Jefferson Airplane. It's a 70s psychedelic song. The lyrics go, "When the truth is found to be lies, don't you need somebody to love?" I skipped over a sentence just to drive at the real crux of the song. "When the truth is found to be lies, don't you need somebody to love?" So what that translates in the movie to me is that when you're faced with crisis in your life, do you you should be able to reorganize your perspective and your head to find new meaning in something else. So in the song perfectly mirrors the movie. Don't you think?
Yeah, when you put it like that, I agree with you for sure. It's the theme of the movie because Larry, who has his truth is his family, his religion, his life, and all of it is unraveling, is coming apart. What happens then? You know, when like his hope is going
When
away.
the truth, which is something you completely rely on, right, is found to be
Yeah,
lies.
exactly. And it's of no use to him at this point in his life.
Right.
I have a
Uh-huh.
question. Now, this is definitely a comedy. I found it to be pretty funny,
Uh-huh.
but I know you and I both have similar taste in humor. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar. So, does this movie make you feel sad?
It doesn't. It doesn't make me sad. I was mentioning that I do have a taste in dark humor. I have loved everything
Yeah,
Coen
it's
Brothers.
definitely a dark comedy.
I loved Fargo, for example, and that's also dark comedy where you're almost laughing at murder. So here, you're laughing at the misfortunes of Larry. The Germans have a word specific to this. It's called, excuse my pronunciation, it's called Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. And it just means to laugh at another's misery. And that's what this movie pretty much exemplifies.
I can say this that dark comedy is not for everyone. I did find it funny, but I can totally see a lot of people watching this movie and thinking to themselves, like, man, this is just depressing. This poor guy, what's happening to him?
Hmm.
I don't want to see him, like, his life get ruined like this. This is where, if you're not a person who is watching a movie and really, really enjoys the writing, because the writing has all the comedy in it, and there is definitely comedy in the acting as well. There's a lot of subdued, like, reactions, or like you were saying, this absurdity in the like what is happening that it makes you laugh.
Hmm.
But if you start thinking too much about the actual misfortunes, then you start feeling pretty bad for the guy.
So the misfortunes in this movie, to me at least, they never rise to the level of a tragedy. There's a very fine line between tragedy and comedy. Don't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think the purpose of Uncle Arthur, of Arthur in general, Larry's older brother? I assume older brother. Actually, I'm not sure if they mention if he's older or younger. I think he's older too, just by how he looks.
Right.
Would you say that he is a more raw representation of what Larry actually is like in terms of very methodical, very introspective, and very much after answers and understanding?
So I do think that they are very similar characters, whereas Larry searches for answers in rationality. He is, after all, a physics professor. Arthur, he's a little, I don't know how to put it, but he searches in his own way. He's writing the Mentaculus. It's a book of what looks like gibberish, but it looks very methodical. It looks very thought out. Do you want to talk about the Mentaculus?
Well, I have this to say about Arthur.
Uh-huh.
I did think it kind of hit me towards the middle, towards the end of the movie. Whatever had been happening to Arthur was kind of foreshadowing to what is about to happen to Larry. So we start the movie with Arthur already in the living room, sleeping there.
Hmm.
A few, I mean, what, maybe a half hour, not even later, Judy, Arthur's or Larry's wife, says that she wants a divorce, asks Larry to sleep in the living room. So he starts living in the living room with Arthur. And then the next time I really noticed something is when, so this is, we haven't even mentioned this yet, but Larry has a neighbor who he is physically attracted to because he sees her sunbathing while he's up on the roof fixing the antenna for his son,
Hmm.
and he goes over to her house to just offer neighborly help because he noticed that her husband is not around, and she tells him it's because he travels.
I think Arthur's main role in this movie is to show that Larry initially had it good. Arthur is always shown to be down on his luck, not have anything to his name, while Larry has a marriage. He's almost about to earn tenure. He's got kids. He's raising them well. He's living in suburbia. He's living his dream right at the beginning of the movie. And so I think the movie sets that dynamic up just to show that Larry has it all so that when his life does crumble down, you don't think that Larry never had it. it sets up that contrast between those two.
So Larry is over at his neighbor's house. They're actually smoking weed.
They are smoking.
And they hear sirens outside. They go outside. They see that Arthur's been arrested for sodomy, and obviously Larry's freaking out, like, what's happening? Why is this happening? And then the next scene is Larry at his lawyer's, and he's seemingly about to get good news from the real estate lawyer from another subplot that's happening with his neighbor
Yeah,
about the property
so
line.
many subplots, right?
Yeah. And so at this point, right before he's about to get some good news, is what we can assume, the lawyer, the real estate lawyer, has a heart attack and dies,
Right.
which is obviously another foreshadowing moment too. So you were right. You were saying Cy Abelman died, but no, it's just another death. And right after that is more bad news about tenure from that. I don't even know the guy's name that keeps coming in talking to Larry
I love
at
the
his
way he
office.
just like strolls into his office all casually and then drops a bomb. Like, oh,
Drops a bomb and then says, "But don't worry about it. It's not relevant."
I wouldn't get too worried. Your life is hinging on, it's in my hands, but don't worry about it. Oh, can I talk about the lawyer? So the heart attack lawyer, I'm just gonna call him heart attack lawyer.
Or is this the real estate lawyer?
So the real estate lawyer, we learn about the real estate lawyer from Larry's actual lawyer. We learn that this real estate lawyer holds the information which is crucial to resolving this dispute, and that this real estate lawyer had only stumbled upon this law that very day or something of that sort. And so it's all almost like a cosmic coincidence that this is happening, that they found the key to their troubles. And yet, as he's saying this, his lawyer saying this, the real estate lawyer walks in and he's about to speak and he collapses in a heart attack. It's great irony there. It's
I mean, the movie is filled with it. I was gonna say, of all the subplots, my favorite, it had to be Clive and the bribe to change his grade, his midterm grade from
oh,
an
that
F.
beats. Yes. How could I forget?
And then, I mean, it's funny enough just there, but then you get his Clive's dad coming in
Mhm.
and talking about suing him for defamation. That whole exchange was just
Yeah,
hilarious.
because there's confusion, right? There's almost like, well, Larry's not confused, but he says something to the extent of, "You can't sue for defamation if it actually happened," and the guy's denying it. Yet at the same time, he's trying to offer him money, and so Larry's is coming back to him and saying, "You can't have it both ways. Which is it? Your son either offered me the money or he didn't offer me the money, in which case I'm defaming him," right? And so the
Yeah.
father at the end of the conversation says, "Embrace the uncertainty, embrace the mystery," which is coming back to what the movie kind of opens with Larry showing the Schrodinger thought experiment where a cat is simultaneously dead and alive. It's two truths at once, basically.
Well said. All right, one more question for you, Fahad. Can you enjoy this movie as it is intended to be enjoyed or to be watched if you know very little or understand very little about the Jewish faith and tradition?
That is a good question. In film, in film and in TV shows, we do see a lot of the Jewish faith represented, and so the casual movie watcher will understand a large portion of it. Yes. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree that it is well represented generally. However, this movie, let's be real, it's a lot. It's like headfirst into
Hmm.
a community that I'm not that familiar with. So I'm just wondering, is there a lot of jokes that I'm missing,
Hmm.
or am I not getting the true sense of the joke because I'm not Jewish?
Yeah, I wonder that too. There were a lot of moments where the writers, the Coen brothers, who are Jewish too, they really harp on the eccentricities of the Jewish people. It's a lot of observational comedy. It's black comedy. The word I was actually looking for back there, that was neurotic.
So basically, people that show their emotions.
It's all the negative emotions, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the negative emotions: anxiety, worry, fear, anger, frustration, envy, jealousy, guilt.
Hmm. All those are out of balance, right?
One thing to note is the movie does start with a quote, And that quote is from Rashi. I'm not sure who Rashi is. I should look that up. Receive with simplicity everything that happens to you. Basically, I guess it's saying, Larry, yeah, all this stuff is happening to you, almost all exclusively negative.
Without any higher purpose. Driving back to the Book of Job, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, and it goes back to the Rabbi Nachsner, who basically is living that quote. Just receive with simplicity everything that happens to you. There's no point, there's no reason to think for why this is happening or what the purpose or reason behind it is. Just it's happening and it doesn't have to have a meaning.
Yeah, perfectly said.
I'm trying to think what other stories there were. We mentioned the Goy one. We mentioned Clive. We mentioned his neighbor. We mentioned obviously Sai. I have a question for you, Fahad. What did you think about Judy and her character, Larry's wife?
Judy, I didn't think much of the character, to be honest. I thought she was just a one-dimensional plot tool. The character wasn't that well developed. I don't think there's much more to say. I don't know. How about you?
I'm with you on there. She was more or less used to progress the story. It's weird because she's his wife and she's the one who starts the unraveling, you could say, because she tells him she wants a divorce and she wants him to get a ritual Jewish divorce so that she can marry a a widow in Cy Abelman who lost his wife 3 years prior. But then we quickly see that she doesn't have much depth to her other than being married to Larry now and wanting to marry Cy. And Cy actually is the character that has a lot of depth to him because he starts showing up in Larry's dreams.
Right. And Larry's dream representing himself, or is he representing something else?
I think he is in the dreams, he's representing what Larry almost wishes he could have said to Cy in terms of being upfront with him. Because when he finds out about Sai, you can tell he's obviously bothered by it. Who wouldn't be? But he doesn't really show that not only to his wife, but even to Sai. Like Sai comes and visits him, and Sai's being all friendly and mature and adult about it. But I think as the audience, we can be like, "Hey, Larry has every right to be angry right now," but he doesn't show any of that.
So going back to that dream sequence, I thought Cy Abelman in that sequence didn't represent himself. I thought he represented simplicity, and here's why. Cy Abelman, he lives this blissfully great life in this movie. You know, he lost his wife, and yet he's gonna marry Larry's wife, right? And the way he approaches Larry, it's with such calm and confidence. You think that he has it all figured out, and after he's dead, he appears in Larry's dream. He's sitting in the audience and he's asking Larry about the equations he just wrote on the board. And he tells Larry, "Well, your equations and everything else, they're neat, but is it convincing?" And I think their size representing simplicity, the simple understanding to everything, which Larry doesn't take.
Good point. The only thing that was weird though is it's in that same dream sequence. Well, you said audience, but I assume you meant like the classroom, right? When he's in the
Class
class.
of the students, yeah.
Yeah, but then like at the very end of it, he's down in front of the class at the board
Uh-huh.
when it's just Larry and Cy, and he physically grabs Larry and like pushes him against the board. Almost like that's where I'm coming from when I say it's almost like the anger that Larry wishes he could have shown
Oh, I see what you're
to
saying.
show how he actually felt about Judy and Sai.
Oh, yes, because he never shows any anger. He's always very civil and
Like
cordial
so
about it.
basically Sai died without Sai died without knowing how Larry actually felt. And I think that bothered Larry that he didn't even know how I felt and now
Uh-huh.
he's showing up in my dreams.
Yeah, he's pestering him in his dreams, right? He can't escape him.
You know what character they had nothing on was Sarah, his daughter, Larry's daughter.
Oh, yeah.
They had just like one like joke about how she likes to do her hair, but Uncle Arthur's in the bathroom and will be out in a minute.
They didn't do the women in this movie any justice in making them three-dimensional characters. The wife, the daughter,
Yeah,
right?
definitely agree. There's not a single one. Wife, daughter, and then the neighbor.
Larry's there's his Jewish friend. They have a scene where they're talking on a grassy area, and Arthur's at the beach. That woman
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
to be the most well developed. Even get a name for that woman.
Yeah, we didn't get a name. I was wondering who that was. Is that supposed to be his sister, a friend, a coworker?
It was just a very long time friend, some a confidant, right? He's talking to her
Yeah.
about the state of his marriage, stuff like that.
Danny had quite a bit going on with his story. So you have his entire school life. Him and his friends are not good students. They're just not good kids in general, actually. They smoke a lot of weed. They swear a lot. And Danny seems to be a very, very ungrateful son. And he's about to have his bar mitzvah. And he's practicing his Hebrew so he can recite properly at the bar mitzvah. He steals from his sister, who steals from their dad. And he's being chased by the bully. Actually, that brings me to one good scene that I liked a lot is when Danny's running home to avoid getting beaten up by the bully that he owes money to. And it's just the same house after the same house. It really gives you that suburban feel. This small cul-de-sac type road. Each house is the same. All these driveways that he's running past, and then he just gets to his house, and then you're seeing the bully run up behind him and just stop because he's too slow.
One other thing about the whole bar mitzvah. So he's listening to audio tapes to recite the Torah, I'm assuming correctly. So he's learning it by sound. He's not actually learning the script. He's not learning the meaning.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so almost separates the sound and what he's actually supposed to what's going to be the sound is going to be what he projects at his bar mitzvah, but that's supposed to be an actual reading, and in that reading you're supposed to get some sort of meaning, right? It's the Torah, it's the Jewish
And it's a
holy book,
significant moment in a Jewish
right?
kid's life.
And so if this moment in this kid's life is devoid of meaning, what's he doing, right?
Yeah, like he's just a very ungrateful kid who basically
Mhm.
has no respect for authority
Or
and
tradition.
doesn't care for their tradition. Yeah, he kind of makes me, I don't know,
Matt,
not just mad, but like it's like that part of the movie where yeah, there's comedy in it, but it makes me feel bad for Larry. Like it genuinely makes me feel bad. Like he's a good guy who's a good father, and just having an ungrateful son like that.
that's the bar mitzvah scene. You see how Larry and his wife seem both very happy in that moment to hear their son.
Recite.
Yeah, they derive pleasure from it. Yeah, his son has almost like hacked his way into being in that moment to be able to pronounce it well, and yeah.
There was actually when I forget where Larry was at this point where he gets a phone call and it's from Danny, and he's kind of surprised that he's getting a call from Danny. So he's like picks up, he's like, "Oh, is everything all right? What happened?" And all Danny had to say was, "Oh, this channel is not working. You need to fix the antenna."
Yeah, the way Danny says it is his show is not working. His show's name was something obscure. It's like it's like saying the Jolly Roger, not the Jolly Roger, but you know, it's just very obscure. It's very short, and it drives that like his son expects his dad to fix everything, to be at his whims, and to yeah.
I was gonna say what you mentioned about the mannerisms and the neurotic personality of these characters. It's there, right? However, when they're talking to one another and having a dialogue, so like that guy who's on the 10-year committee talking to Larry, the lawyer talking to Larry, the Larry talking to the rabbis, it's pretty subdued and formal, and all that neurotic behavior that we're seeing is being like pushed down. You can like kind of tell it's being pushed down, and
What do you mean by that? It's suppressed?
yeah, suppressed, and they're trying to. I mean, it's just a very formal way of talking to one another, there's like a level of respect for one another that they're showing, even if they don't.
It's almost a respect for authority, like the authority of the rabbi or the authority of the lawyer.
Yeah, and I think just as I mentioned earlier, it's exemplified most with Larry's relationship with Sai, where
How do you
he's
mean?
being formal with this guy that he doesn't need to be formal with.
Owe him anything, in
Yeah,
fact, and yet
exactly.
he's being kind. Why greet him with kindness, right?
Actually, let's talk about the title itself, A Serious Man. The only time that I heard it in the movie was when they were describing Cy Abelman at his
Yeah,
funeral.
he was a serious man, which is completely not true. Sai was not a serious man. That rabbi was speaking falsehoods about the life that Sai lived.
Yeah, and at the very end, Larry is like when he's praying, he's like, "I want to," or is he talking to? No, he's talking to the last rabbi that he really wants to talk to. He's like, "Look, I'm a serious man. Like,
Yeah,
take me seriously." When he's talking to the
yeah,
secretary
yeah.
for the last rabbi, and he's telling her, "I'm a serious man," and she's
So what was it? So he's telling her I'm a serious man. So he's drawing similarities between him and Sai. But what is it?
yeah, I'm not sure what it means. I guess it just would mean that someone who you should take seriously, who demands respect, who demands authority based on, who they are. And in Larry's case, he's just a good guy who's kind, nice to people, makes an honest living. We didn't even talk about the bribe, like the actual bribe, because he eventually does take it,
Well, in the
right?
dream sequence, he gives it to his brother, and he sends him on his way to Canada. And in that sequence, the brother gets shot, and
His
then we
neighbor
we
shoots
wake up
him.
to realize that that was a dream. The money, I assume, was still kept in
Yeah.
that drawer.
But we see him change the
We
grade.
do see him the grade.
This is at the very end though, so that's right when he changes the grade is when
What
like
happened right before? What
the
happened?
doctor calls.
What
The
happens right
doctor calls
before he changes the grade? Is there another financial burden that's laid upon Larry? Is that why he changes the grade, essentially accepting the money?
Larry does have a financial burden that he sees right before he changes the grade. He gets the bill, the invoice from his lawyer, and it's for
Right.
3,000
Yes.
bucks.
Okay. So
So when he sees the invoice, he decides he'll change the grade, which implies he's going to keep the money. Right when he does that, the 10-year committee person does come up to him and he says to him, I can't make the officially say this, but you should, feel comfortable. We'll talk.
so that was a brief moment of levity in his life.
Yeah, so there's almost like this moment of, all right, things are going to work out for him. He has the money to pay the bill. He just got a kind of a confirmation that his tenure is going to happen, and right then he gets a call from the doctor, and it appears to be the doctor has something serious to talk about. Yeah, man, it's a kind of downer if you think about it. I mean, is it really funny if it keeps happening over and over
Well,
again?
yeah, because it is a comedy. There's still something about it that prevents. I don't know. I wasn't sympathetic towards Larry, even though he's a nice guy and everything. Because it was a comedy, I just enjoyed it as such. I didn't think of it much as a tragedy. But when you think about it, yeah, definitely tragedy for sure.
Yeah, but it's a comedy movie, and if you go in with the mindset you're about to watch a comedy, you're gonna accept the
Right.
darkness
It's
of
a
the
comedy
humor.
with more what's it called? The themes that we already went over about lack of clarity and accepting life with simplicity. That's all there, right in the background.
And there's almost a moment where Larry does figure it out, or seems to have figured it out, because he goes over one of those physics formulas, and it's called the uncertainty principle. And he's like, it proves that we cannot really know what is going
Oh,
on.
right, right.
So it's almost like a moment of clarity for him where he's like, yep, I have no idea what's happening. And this also exists within this world that I do know,
And
mathematics
he
and physics.
finishes that lecture to his students. He says, "Well, even though the uncertainty principle cannot be fully understood, you'll still be responsible for it on your midterms. You will be tested on it." It's like
Yeah.
something that's unknowable. Your students are expected to know it. That's actually in the dream sequence, and then Cy Abelman appears in the audience in the classroom.
Yeah, exactly. That is in the dream sequence, yes. One whole scene. All right, Fahad, I think that we're good over here.
Good here too.
Thank you for listening to this production of The Twice Over. If you would like to keep up with us, please subscribe wherever you listen, and do follow us at The Twice Over on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you would like to support us, you can do so on Patreon, or you can just tell a friend about the podcast. And finally, if there are any comments or feedback, please email them to us at comments@thetwiceover.com, or you can just tweet at us. The music you hear is from Amerigo Gazaway. Look him up on Bandcamp, he has some great stuff. We'll be back next week with another episode. Okay, yeah, I mean, just looking at your waves to make sure that they're similar.
Are they?
Yeah, they look fine.
Should I
Okay.
be louder?
No. I think where you are is fine.
Should I be louder?
I think that is going to be a problem.
That's going to be a problem.
All right, you're good.
Okay.
All right, ready?
Yes.